Thank you, and thank you for staying all the way to the last session, and thank you for, I don't know, washing your hands, I guess. Yeah, so let's get to it. We're talking about low context DevOps. Who am I? My name's Tom Limoncelli. He, him. As Jay mentioned, I'm the manager of the S3 team at stackoverflow.com. I've been a system administrator for much too long. I've worked at companies like Google and Bell Labs, and I blog and I tweet, and I've written a bunch of books. And as mentioned before, I work at Stack Overflow. Let me do a quick show of hands. Who here has heard of Stack Overflow? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, we'll just say most. Okay, the last time I spoke at this conference, I made that joke. I have an updated version of the joke. Who here knows that Stack Overflow has like a Teams thing that's just for like Q&A within your company? Okay, so see, that's not as funny, right? Okay, yeah. Maybe we'll see that again. Okay, so this talk has 3 parts. We're going to talk about high and low context cultures. We're going to talk about low context DevOps, coin that I phrased, and phrase that I coined, and we're going to end by talking about leadership. And I should warn you that about an hour ago I took some Sudafed, so I might be going really fast. Or if I took the wrong pill and everyone starts getting wavy, then this talk is going to be much more interesting for me than for you. So, high and low context cultures. It's story time. Story number 1. Someone's traveling in the third world, foreign land, and he comes across a village. And he goes to a shopkeeper. Shopkeeper won't talk to him. Goes to another store. The shopkeeper there won't talk to him. It's like, what's wrong? So he's walking down the street, and a little boy comes to him, and he says, Mister, when you come to this village, first you have to talk to the elders, and they'll bless you, and then people will talk to you. And he says, what? Oh, okay. So he goes to the elders, talks to them, gets their blessing, and then the shopkeeper's willing to talk to him. Later that day, he's sitting by the side of the road, and he's thinking, how the heck was I supposed to know that? At the same time, the little boy is at home, and he's thinking, how the heck could that guy not know that? Right? This is a high context culture where there are many unwritten rules. Story number 2. About 7 years ago, I joined Stack Overflow. And as part of my training, I asked, well, how do we create a virtual machine? And my mentor sat me down, showed me, it was about 20 steps. I'm taking notes because there's no documentation that explains how to do this. And we get through the whole process, and I said, none of this is written down? How that's odd. And he says, well, we figured that anyone who can make it through our interview process should be able to, just know this kind of thing. And so later that night, I'm thinking, how the heck was I supposed to know all that? And he was probably sitting at home thinking, gosh, we hired this world-recognized system administrator. How did he not know all that? But you could be the best, VMware guru, and how are you going to know all these things? Story number 3 is much shorter. The next day, I get a call from my boss. Now, at the time, by the way, now all of this is automated, but at the time we had, this was manual, and also the last step was you had to add any new machine that you created into a manually maintained inventory. And my boss called to say, hey, you created a machine, didn't put it in the inventory. Now, I could be the world's most brilliant VMware expert in the world, but how would I know that we have this inventory, right? So, high context cultures. High context cultures are where communication is implicit. There's less written and formal information. It's more like, hey, we just know the collective history, and that's how we get through. People have to kind of read between the lines. This is usually good when there are long-term relationships. For example, if you have a party with friends, there might be certain unwritten rules that your friends, just know. And You've probably, maybe you've joined someone else's friends for a night out, and you don't know those rules, and it seems very dissettling, very confusing. Contrast that to a low-context culture. In a low-context culture, communication is explicit. There are rules, you are told what they are. This kind of knowledge is codified. It's written down someplace, usually external, usually very accessible. A lot of places where your interpersonal connections have a short duration require a low-context culture. So, for example, airports are usually a low-context culture. You're not there very long, so you need to be told what to do. You need to be told security's this way, gates are that way. It's not just based on, everyone knows that the higher number gates are, that way, right? That wouldn't make sense. And anthropologists study this kind of thing, and they typically classify different languages and cultures as being high context or low context. Traditionally, Eastern cultures are thought of as being more high context. It's more about what isn't said than what is said. Low context cultures tend to include things like Germany and Scandinavia and the US. Since we're in New York, I thought I'd mention one of my favorite high context environments right here in New York. I live in New Jersey. I commute into New York every day, and I go through Penn Station. How many people here came through Penn Station today? Wow, a lot of people. Yeah, super high context. The map of Penn Station only makes sense if you're the person who drew this map. Often if I have a long wait for a train, I just stand in the hallway and look for tourists that look lost and offer to help them. And sometimes I can give them directions. Sometimes I just give up and say, look, I'll just walk you there. I can't even describe it. One of my favorite signs in Penn Station is this sign. The 7th Avenue subway is that way. 30 years ago, they changed the name of the 7th Avenue subway to the 123 line. But this sign stands, still is up there. And I thought, okay, well, it's just one sign that they forgot to change. That's cool, a little mistake. But then I realized the sign is illuminated. There's a little light bulb behind that. For 30 years, someone's been changing this light bulb and is not empowered to tell their boss, hey, maybe we should switch this sign. Right? Okay, so let's talk about low-context DevOps. I assert that a DevOps environment where you work should strive to be low context. And let me ask you, who would like to work in a let's do show of hands, high and low context. Who would like to work in a high context DevOps environment? Not a lot of hands. How many people would like to work in a low context? Yeah, okay, so now I'm gonna skip the next 20 slides where I try to convince you. And let's just go to how do you make DevOps, how do you lower the context? So for the rest of this talk, I will focus on 3 ways to reduce the required context of your DevOps environment. Carefully constructed defaults, making write easy, and ubiquitous documentation. So, carefully constructed defaults. One of the clearest examples of this is new employee onboarding. How many people, when they join their current company, well, I think everyone, they needed a PC or some kind of workstation. There was certain software they needed to do their job, and they needed access to various systems and permissions on those systems, right? How many people didn't have those 3 things for the first month, right? How many for, the first 3 months? Yeah, there's still hands up. Incredible. Think about it. We are typically at companies, the average tech worker is at a company of about 3 years. So if for 3 months, you're not productive, that's just incredibly inefficient. It just makes me angry. But why does this happen? I mean, why does it stay like that? Well, first of all, the new employees can't fix it. They're new. They don't want to make trouble, and they don't have the power to fix the problems. Experienced employees aren't feeling the pain anymore because they've gotten through all that stuff. So, if they're not feeling the pain, they have another project they could work on. Also, it requires working across silos. To fix a lot of these problems, you have to work across the IT team and the InfoSec team and the engineering team and HR, and no one wants to talk to HR. or outside their silo. It's difficult. How many people here are familiar with the Phoenix Project by Gene Kim? It's kind of the book that crystallized or catalyzed the DevOps movement. And there's a copy. Gene Kim has a new book out, just came out recently, called The Unicorn Project, which really focuses on this kind of developer productivity. Highly recommend it. I recommend it so much I animated his book like that. Yeah, that's how strongly I feel. And since he talked a lot about it, I'm not going to talk much beyond what I just said. Let's go on to number 2, making right easy. So I have a philosophy that if you want people to do something, make sure that the lazy path embodies the practices that you want them to do, right? So for example, if you've ever programmed with the OpenSSL library, you need a freaking PhD to get all the settings right to listen on a port as a HTTP service, right? And once you do get it right, well, next year it's all wrong because things have changed. The LibreSSL people said, for our library, we're going to offer an API that just magically starts listening on a port, and if you're totally lazy and just use all the defaults, you get the timelessly correct settings. Much better, right? The world should be this way. Your CI/CD pipeline should embody the recommended practices. If you want everyone to do something, make sure that's the default in all the templates and everything in your CI/CD pipeline. Make sure your base library includes all the operational goodness. It's hard enough to hire a good developer, but it's even harder to find a good developer that also writes code that is operable, right? That generates telemetry for the monitoring system, that has standard flags, all these different things that the operations people want developers to put into their code. Well, some companies design their base library such that you can't write a Hello World web server without getting all that operational goodness just built in for free. And that's how things should be. Like, if you want to break the standard, it should be difficult. And we have opportunities to do this kind of thing, make easy right on all of our different DevOps, foundational tools. From our bug system to our source control system. And it's really difficult to develop empathy for new people. I mean, often the only way you can improve some of these things is find a developer, maybe a junior developer or someone who's been recently hired, and just sit with them for a week and observe and see what problems they have. Or maybe a day, or if you don't have a day, for an hour. You will learn so much, and you'll be highly embarrassed as you start making all these changes that are like, oh, of course, why wouldn't that be the default? And lastly, ubiquitous documentation. Ideally, we would like documentation to be the right information in the right place at the right time, right? If I'm in a situation, I shouldn't have to think, oh, let me go search for that. It should be right in front of my face. Which reminds me of a recent trip to London. I landed in London Heathrow Airport and then took the train to Paddington Station, a beautiful train station. And the next thing that I needed was to take a taxi to my hotel. And I was about to ask someone, where's the taxi stand? And I looked down at my feet, and I saw that there are these lines. Here, let me turn the picture so you could read that better. Look, it says taxi. And I just looked down, and I just started following the line. And there are other people doing it, too. We're just like zombies. And this was perfect. And it was the right amount of information, just the word taxis. It didn't have to explain what a taxi is or, quote from Wikipedia. It just, taxis this way. And it was where I wanted. Awesome example. Wouldn't it be great if, your DevOps environment, all the tools and everything were like that? It should be. And we can do it now with the miracle of URLs, right? I've been a sysadmin long enough that URLs didn't exist when I first got access to a Unix system. And you had to write a paragraph explaining, go to the bookshelf. It's the third book on the right. Turn to page 75. Third paragraph down. Now you have a URL. We're so lucky. And we should include these URLs, just everywhere obvious, in error messages, in our control panels, in our alert messages, everywhere that people might want to find info. In fact, when someone asks me a question, I often say, I will gladly I will gladly answer you, but first tell me, where did you look so far? And usually, I'll discover at least one place that I need to put a URL. Or they searched for a word that's slightly different. Like in our company system, what was it? Oh, I edited a page so that it said 401k like 5 times, with parentheses, hyphenated spaces, so that no matter what you search for, you would find the darn page on our 401k plan. Apple gets it. If you've upgraded a Mac recently and they're changing the default shell to Z shell, if you're still using Bash, when you open a terminal window, it tells you, here's the command you need to type to change the default, and here's a URL explaining why. Well, not why, but it gives you more information. Anyway, so creating a culture of documentation takes effort up and down the org chart. Management needs to set expectations. It's not done until it's documented. That has to be a phrase that your managers use all the time. I also say it's not done until it's monitored and a bunch of other things, but start with documentation. And not just for big projects. Every time you close a ticket, was there something I could have changed or updated that would make, in the documentation, so that the next person that gets a similar ticket has an easier job, right? And now you're creating this virtuous cycle of improved efficiency because the documentation just keeps getting better and better. Similar, when you answer a question in chat or when you're doing releases, I maintain an open source project called DNS Control, and we needed to ship a new release recently, and I told a coworker, well, here's the document on how to do it, and I'll meet with you in half an hour. I got there a half an hour later, she was done, and I was very proud of myself because it spells out all the details. Because every time I've done a release, I found at least one thing to change. And then I asked her, I said, okay, now that you've done a release, complain about the document. And she said, well, I had to try this twice before I figured out what you really meant. Awesome. To me, that's victory. That's yes, we have an opportunity to make an improvement here. I think people should always be documenting. I have a column in ACMQ magazine. Here, if you Google Limoncelli, always be documenting, you'll find this article about a lot of my philosophy about the virtuous cycle of documentation leading to efficiency, leading to small bits of automation that rolls up to bigger bits of automation. And anyway, take a look. We should treat documents like we treat software. You should be able to file bugs. There should be, product management should take the documentation as seriously as the software. And we have to fight some of the excuses we hear from people that don't want to write documentation. Someone recently said, well, my code is my documentation. No, it's not. At a minimum, you need to write a doc that points to where in the code you would look, right? If people need more inspiration, I'm sure I've convinced all of you, but if your coworkers need inspiration on why to document. Someone recently at a meetup, they said, so the problem with documentation is it helps everyone on my team except me. I already know the information. And I said, no, it helps you because people will bother you less, and most importantly, the more you document, the more you can relax when you're on vacation. And to me, that's reason enough. But in a lot of organizations, there just aren't any docs, right? How many people have no kind of document repository? Oh, only a few hands. Excellent. I'm proud of you all. Raise your hand if you like to write documentation. Not a lot. I've written 5 or 6 books, and I don't like writing documentation. I'm not calling you liars. I'm just saying it's not a common trait. And I have some theories on why people avoid writing documentation. One is that, you finally sit down and you're like, what's the scope of this doc? Like, do I have to like write a whole bunch of background or just the specific answer? A lot of times we're uncertain what the audience is. Like, am I writing this? Does it have to be clear enough for someone who's like senior to understand, or is this for someone who just got hired or very junior? Oh, and then there's this other reason, and I have to warn you that this next reason, I'm going to show you a slide that is very scary. Therefore, I'm going to start with a disclaimer, and I'm going to do it in Carnival Barker style. Ladies and gentlemen, boys, girls, and gender rebels, DevOps of all ages, what I'm about to show you is the most terrifying slide ever seen at a DevOps conference. Stephen King's books and movies have nothing on what you're about to see. People with weak constitutions may choose to leave the room. Parents, cover your children's eyes. If you are pregnant or under the supervision of a doctor, I cannot be held responsible for what happens. Are you ready? Are you ready? Yeah. Okay, 1, 2, 3. It's a blank screen! Oh my God, I hope the microphone picked that up. Yeah, blank screen syndrome. That's the writer's biggest fear. And for those of you, like, so if you're a Vim user, that's what that looks like. The Microsoft people in the room, for you more junior people, what Notepad looks like. The sophisticated people, I don't want to leave you out. And of course, the big trend thing. Can't leave that out. So while not a recognized medical condition, blank screen syndrome is a very real problem, right? You've spent all this time, like all week, you thought, Friday, I'm finally going to have time to work on that document. And all through the week, you're really procrastinating, but really you're thinking, Friday, I'm going to finally sit down and write that document, and Friday finally comes, and you sit down, and you get that blank screen, and you're like, oh my, what do I do now? What's the scope? What's the audience? What's the everything? And then over in the side of your screen, a chat message appears, and you say, oh, I'll come back to the document later. And you never come back to that document. No, you never don't. You never do. So we really need to, let's get rid of the blank page syndrome once and for all. There's a couple basic things we can do. First of all, we can make really awesome templates, right? In our environment at Stack, every service has what we call the service doc. Every alert has an alert template. So when you're starting, you don't start with a blank document. You bring in this template, and it's more like you're filling out a form. What does this do? And usually, what's not on this slide is that there's little helper text in italics. Delete this sentence, but this is where you write a one-sentence summary of the service. What's the history? What's the desired state? What are some common issues? Similarly for alerts. Another thing you can do is don't try to write a big document. Write in small batches. Like I mentioned before, like everything comes in small batches nowadays. Have you noticed this? Like dog food comes in small batches. I don't know why my dog would care about that. Anyway, write in small batches. Like you close that ticket, maybe you're only changing one sentence to the document, and that's fine. You're just I would rather have 1 million small changes in a week than an attempt to do a big change on Friday that you end up not doing. Also, include your documentation in your work estimates. When your boss says, how long is that going to take? And you say 3 days, or 4 if I also update the documentation, don't say that. Just say 4 days. Just build it in, right? I had someone recently say, Tom, as manager, you don't give us enough time to write documentation. I said, have I ever told you don't write documentation? You give me the time estimates. Include the documentation in the update. The other thing we can do is we can take text that people already write. We could find where do engineers already write and repurpose that text. So every time you get email with a really good explanation, hit reply all and send them a compliment. Say, hey, that's a great explanation. Why don't you put that in our document repo? Right? When someone has a great explanation in the chat room, tell them, hey, put that in the doc repo. Years ago, I worked at Google, and I remember it was 2 weeks in, one of my coworkers sent email to the whole team saying, new policy, when this happens on our server, you have to do this. And I talked to the person and said, okay, that's great. Does this, why don't you put this in our doc area? And he said, well, no, the whole team got the email. And I said, oh, so does this policy not apply to anyone hired after today? Yeah. So I mentioned I work at Stack Overflow. Another place that engineers like to write without prompting is Stack Overflow, right? And it's so easy because someone else wrote the question, so that helps define the scope and the audience, right? If someone asks, how do I exit the Vim editor, you know when you're done. You're done when you've answered the question. You know the audience. You can kind of guess that this person's new to Vim. Though my favorite Vim joke is, I've been using Vim for 10 years because I can't figure out how to quit. And there's even templates and wizards. There's the, when you go to ask a question, there's now the question asking wizard, and soon there's going to be a question answering wizard. And I'm not here to do a sales pitch or anything, but we do have this new Stack Overflow for Teams. It's pretty cool. We have small, medium, and large systems. Okay, whew. Last part. Let's talk about leadership. Boy, we've talked about a lot of things today, haven't we? Like documentation culture and smart defaults and all these different things. But who's going to make that happen? Are you going to wait for your manager to make that happen? Your manager's probably not here. Plus, your manager has other things to do. Your manager, if they're a good manager, probably is delegating this back down to you. In other words, we need to be the heroes that we're waiting for. Don't wait for other people to start on these kind of things. And this is my call to action, and this is why I'm happy to be the last speaker, because this is the note I want to end on. Everything DevOps related is about making changes in your organization. And who's going to make that change? Who's going to make that change for the better? It has to be you. We are the heroes that we're waiting to arrive. Now, people often say, Tom, but I don't want to be a manager. Managers make those changes. No. Management and leadership are two very different things. Management is something in the org chart. Management is really about three things. It's about setting priorities, providing resources to meet those priorities, and clearing roadblocks. If you're a manager and you're doing one of those three things, pat yourself on the back, you're doing what managers are supposed to do. Leadership is different. Leadership is something everyone can do. Everyone should be a leader. A leader is, in my mind, best symbolized by the children's game, Follow the Leader, which has two components. The lead child does two things that symbolize leadership to me. They go first, and they make it easy for others to follow. They go first. That's kind of obvious. They're at the head of the line. But they make it easy for others to follow. There's decisions that have to be made. Do we jump over this rock, or do we walk on top of it? They make that decision, and everyone else copies them, and that makes it easy to follow. When we walk under a branch, do we duck under the branch, or do we lift it up and hand it to the next person? Well, I'm going to decide we're going to lift it up and hand it to the next person. They're going to hand it to the next, and next, and next. They went first, and they made it easy for others to follow. And that's the essence of leadership. In summary, we talked about high context and low context DevOps. I won't read all this slide, but this is where everyone takes a picture. Anyway, that's really my talk. Thank you all. I hope you enjoyed the conference, and I hope to see you next year.